The Ala Wai Canal. Once the site of a luscious, thriving agricultural system, today it's a poorly maintained, yet still essentially incomplete attempt at creating additional developmental space for the Western world's idea of advancement and opportunity. For this presentation, we are approaching two major questions. How did Ala Wai become the polluted, often seen as dangerous canal that it is today? And more importantly, how can we reverse the pollution and restore life to the canal? The area where the Ala Wai Canal and Waikiki currently exist used to be a vast wetland full of vegetation as well as aquatic life. The watershed that spanned from what we now know as the Pali out to Manoa and down to Waikiki was a sophisticated collection of hundreds of taro fields, rice paddies, duck ponds, and fishing areas in a symbiotic web of stewardship and cultivation. This marshland was the epitome of traditional Hawaiian agriculture, thriving in the natural nutrients nestled in native Hawaiian lands, teeming with life provided by the streams coming down the mountains and emptying out into the water basin where Waikiki is today. These coastal marshes sustained the livelihood of not just hundreds of plant, fish, bird, and insect species, but also the native Hawaiians who built a home on the island and later on, Chinese rice and duck farming immigrants for centuries. The ecosystem in the Ala Wai region enjoyed a harmonious balance. Waters would flow down the Ko'olau Mountains into three streams: the Macaulay Stream along the western side, the Manoa Stream down the center, which would then feed into the Pololo Stream, which fed into the marshlands of Ala Wai and Waikiki. This flow of water allowed for the natural distribution and washing away of sediment and natural debris, providing nutrients and minerals to the waterways, land, and ultimately the animals and organisms that lived in the area. That changed as Western civilization began settling into the Hawaiian Islands. In the early 1900s, the U.S. War Department began planting a foothold into the Waikiki area with spaces such as where Fort DeRussy exists today, and eventually the territorial government of the time declared the wetlands as unsanitary and concocting the idea to drain the wetlands for further development, using the excuse that the unsanitary scent of decay was reason enough to develop the area and clean it up. This all led up to the Ala Wai Canal project. In the 1920s, the Waikiki landscape was changed drastically as they began dredging the wetlands of the Ala Wai and using the dredge material to fill in the marshes that inhabited modern-day Waikiki, creating more surface for expanding human society but drastically reducing the waterways and natural habitats of the animals that once lived and thrived along the marsh. Where once various shrimp, fish, marine birds, and other invertebrates grew and thrived in a balance of nature alongside their human stewards, Western civilization came and pushed them out, filled their waterways, homes with dredge and dirt, and leaving only outlet streams and the canal itself. After decades of human development and mankind's industrial and technological advancements, the waterways and canal have become polluted and filled with pollutants and sludge. While expectations and plans were to craft the canal such that water would still be able to pass through and flow out into the ocean, maintaining its ability to naturally pass on sediment and sludge, this proved to not be the case. Half of the outlet plans were stopped when the eastern end of the Ala Wai was never continued on into the ocean, allegedly due to the unexpected effects that runoff would have on the beaches of Waikiki, leaving only the Ala Moana end of the canal flowing out to the ocean. Over time, the rate of pollution became too high for the one outlet. Between natural sediment runoff and the influences of man, from pesticides to urban waste, the canal has become a shadow of its former self, surrounded just as much by the man-made concrete jungle that Waikiki has become than by the natural beauty it originally possessed. Today, the Ala Wai Canal is hardly able to sustain much diversity of life. The ecosystem prior to the development of the canal supported a vast array of marine life, but in recent times, native species struggled to survive in its polluted waters, and just a few years ago, only a few species were known to live in the canal, with scarcely anything more than mosquitoes, tilapia, aholehole, and oopu. Though water still flows down from the mountains through streams, along the way, urban street drains add pollutants to the runoff. The excessive sediment and runoff is too much for the water flow. Studies conducted at the eastern end by Jefferson Elementary School show heavy amounts of bacterial buildup in sludge. Some sediment and natural organic sludge would be able to flow out and dissipate into the ocean, or become naturally digested and broken down into non-toxic compounds, but the amounts being carried into the canal have been too much to break down, causing harmful levels of buildup and making it difficult to maintain much biodiversity. Nearly 2 feet of sludge buildup was recorded as recently as 3 years ago on the eastern end, and around the same time along the water runoff at Ala Wai Elementary School, 10 inches of sludge buildup were recorded. We'll see some of the continuous results of those studies on a follow-up image, but for reference, this would be like stepping into soft snow and having your feet sink deep enough for the snow to reach your knees, except in this case it's not snow, it's a combination of organic and inorganic sludge and waste, not a very conducive environment for marine life to thrive. So can this ecosystem be restored and allow life to return to its waterways? Efforts have been underway to do exactly that. The Smart Ala Wai project, although no longer funded, laid a lot of the groundwork that other organizations have picked up on to begin rejuvenating the Ala Wai area, not just the canal. They began monitoring water quality in the streams feeding into the canal, as well as the canal itself, tracking temperature, pH balance, and oxygen levels. They also promoted natural solutions, including but not limited to planting and maintaining vegetation and plant life that would better capture and filter stormwater and runoffs, reducing the pollution going into the canal. They also proposed restoring blocked off waterways that used to help with the natural flow of water and sediment to help better flush the waste through the ecosystem. Their efforts to manage the pollution of the Ala Wai laid much of the groundwork for current active projects, most notorious of which is the Genki Ala Wai project and their creation and use of the Genki balls, a natural and eco-friendly method of eating away at the grime and sludge that pollute the Ala Wai Canal. These Genki balls use a method of delivering effective microorganisms, abbreviated as EM, a combination of yeast and naturally occurring beneficial bacteria, into the sludge buildup using mud and other natural structural ingredients to bring the EM into the sludge. As the delivery system of the balls dissolve into the water, the EM then transmits into the pollutants and begins breaking down the sludge so that the water flow can flush it away, even eating up and consuming escaping gases that could cause undesirable odors. It's almost like adding probiotics into your digestive system to better break down food and help our bodies absorb nutrients and expel unusable waste. Studies from the Genki Ala Wai project conducted along the canal outside of Jefferson and Ala Wai Elementary have shown a significant reduction in sludge buildup. The tables here show a steep decline in sludge volume from nearly 2 feet on the enclosed end on the east side of the Ala Wai and 10 inches in the middle of the Ala Wai Canal by Ala Wai Elementary in 2021, to less than half those respective depths of sludge just a year later. Findings from just a year ago show the depth of sludge by each of these school locations to be 10% of what they were roughly 18 months prior. Another study conducted using the waters of the canal outside of Jefferson Elementary measured the levels of the fecal bacteria Enterococci, which is an indicator of the levels of fecal matter in the water. Such fecal matter may also contain other disease-causing bacteria, protozoa, and viruses, so the presence of high levels of Enterococci can be harmful. Acceptable, safe measures of Enterococci using the measurements of CFU per milliliter or colony-forming units per milliliter of water would be 104 CFU. According to data collected by the Genki Ala Wai project, the levels of Enterococci detected in the canal waters outside of Jefferson Elementary were as high as 697 CFU around the time the project began in 2019, indicating that the water was highly toxic and polluted with unsafe levels of fecal matter. Due to various circumstances, these levels may rise and drop naturally, but the overall effects of the Genki balls indicate a vast improvement and reduction in harmful bacteria, resulting in water visibility that have not been seen in decades and the return of fish species that have long been absent from the canal. The reintroduction of beneficial bacteria, much like bringing phytoplankton into appropriate parts of seawater or probiotic bacteria to our digestive systems, appears to have rejuvenated much of the health of the canal. There's still a long way to go to restoring the Ala Wai to a level of health that can be a supportive environment for a greater variety of marine life, and it may not quite return to what existed in its former marshland state, but with time, effort, and awareness, hopefully a safe enough waterway that can support greater varieties of fish, shrimp, ducks, and plant life can thrive within the Ala Wai water column again.